God bless you, brothers and sisters, and welcome to this week's episode of GODSPEED Magazine Live. As we dive into this month's issue, the street ministry issue, we're looking at those times when a physical, on the ground, feeding the people, building homes for the people, providing clothes for the people, direct touch ministry is everything that it takes and everything that's needed.
BOGG was started in 2010 with the dream to feed people in the Dayton area with more than just food.
We saw a need in the city for people to be fed. We decided to do something about it. Along the way, something cultivated, something much bigger than we could have ever thought. It was community.
We knew this couldn't look like traditional methods of food distribution. It had to be different. We had to connect with people. We had to be genuine.
We started as just two guys with a cooler going to a few people's homes each week. That's transformed into hundreds of people coming together to serve thousands of people food each month in our community. Mobile Meals, it's what we do, it's who we are. It's gathering together for food, for community, to be something, to recognize that life is this full circle process, and we are going to do it together as one.
We all come for the same reasons, food and community. At the end, we all be fed.
Welcome back. So how is God moving in his people to feed the least of these right now? I pray that you enjoy and love this story as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. This particular story, written by Deborah Fluke, one of our great contributors to GODSPEED Magazine. The story is called God's Grace is Literally Feeding People, BOGG Ministry Advances. And you might ask, who's BOGG? BOGG is Because of God's Grace. This ministry has been around for quite some time. We interviewed them several years ago, and we love what they're doing. You'll see in this issue how there was incredible tornadoes in Ohio. You'll get to see pictures. There's slideshows that are going to help you take a deeper look at what was going on that created some of these contexts that they've had to jump in and save people. Recently here in California, we had a scenario where Mexico, which is relatively close to us, Mexico had more than 108 wildfires burning in more than 17 states, and the people in multiple areas, including Chihuahua, Mexico, had literally nothing, had been left without clothes, that were sleeping on the ground, had no food, and our whole community got together and everybody just took everything they had, and one of our neighbors brought it all down to Mexico immediately to try to help out. And those things where we move as his hands and feet, these are the things that Jesus answered when he was asked directly who gets into heaven. Think of the parable of the Samaritan in context to who gets into heaven. If you have God in flesh answering this way, it should cause us to pause and say, what does my walk look like? Am I moving? And we got to all individually say, okay, here's a time when I can jump in. And these guys, Jason Barton and Johnston, just did an amazing job of this ministry over the years. They've managed to help all these families feed families, love families. You'll see the pictures and you'll get to read about the context of all the different ways they're providing everything from coffee to full meals, just loving on people everywhere they go. And I'm talking about like whole boxes of groceries for families, not just like an individual, like, I'm talking about feeding people for the week. And people depend on them, and people have leaned on them, and people have been constantly just won over because we know that kindness leads to repentance. And these guys are bringing that. Feed people, love people. It's all written on their trucks. Take a look at this story, and then at the end, consider this idea that God made GODSPEED Magazine for you to become the story. It was something he said in prayer, God said in prayer, that it was for you, the viewer, the reader, the subscriber, to become the story. And so when you see this at the end, you'll see it says the story is not over. And there's a video of Jason Johnston. And you're going to find out how you can jump in and get involved with them. And in just a minute, we're going to bring Jason Johnston directly to you so you can hear it straight out of his mouth and learn more about this ministry. Stay with us. After getting a good sense of what this incredible team is doing, I want you to have the opportunity to meet Jason Johnston in person. Jason, the founder, or at least co-founder of Because of God's Grace Ministries. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Truly a pleasure, man. It's so good to see the words of Scripture walking, living, like the parable of the Samaritan, just as an example, but just people actually feeding people. There was a video, it was on Facebook, I'm almost positive it was 2019, but you mentioned something about it being a hard year. I'm trying to remember how have things been going just in general for BOGG because of God's grace?
Things have been really great. We are in our 9th year, heading towards 10. Maybe in March, it'll be 10 years. And there's lots of ups and downs, as we all have in our day-to-days, regardless of what we do. But things are very well. We are able to continue to love and feed our community. And as a lot of unique challenges have come up this year, we've just been able to sit back and see what God has to do with it, and then put ourselves back out there.
Amazing. You said it's been almost 9 years now. I was trying to put it together. I think the last time we talked was 2015.
Yeah, we are in our 9th year, and it'll be 10 years in March. It's upcoming March.
If any of you get a calling from God, you'll start to more and more and more treasure the people who don't give up on their callings from God, because when you're in your calling from God, you take a lot of blows to the face from enemy attacks, and the fact that he's there 9 years later just is a huge testament to his heart, to him, Jason and the organization's heart. Does God have you focus mostly on children, mostly on families, or mostly like just your whole community?
It is about people, so it's the entire community. We've gotten to do some really unique things depending on where you fall in that demographic. So this past year we did a coloring book to have at all of our events for the kids, where they can have a BOGG coloring book and a brand new box of crayons, and something they can do on site while their parents are getting groceries, but also take it home and have those resources that they may or may not have. But what kid doesn't need a new coloring book? And we've been working on a delivery program for elderly and disabled people. And so it just depends. We're always focusing on people. So I guess the simple answer is people. We've done some cool things this year that are just a little bit newer.
Oh, again, just love it, love it, love it, love it. Yeah, it's my intention to find ways to encourage everybody watching to be interested in grouping together funding to help you with absolutely everything all the time. I know you guys have made used trucks work. You've just pulled this together sort of out of nowhere the whole time, and it amazes me. Again, 9 years of making all the rest of us look like we're sitting still in terms of directly reaching the people. Have there been times when you experienced the hand of God in your ministry in a way that almost brings like a glory story to God, because there's the evidence and nobody can say that wasn't God, kind of thing?
Yeah, I would say the most recent thing that is national is we had tornadoes, right, hit our city Memorial Day weekend or Labor Day weekend, whatever one, I got them confused. But it was a what are we going to do moment, right? And everybody was in a complete panic. And unless you experience a natural disaster, it's super easy to see it on TV and go, oh, I'll send resources, right? Or I'll make a donation to one of the majors. But when it's in your backyard and you have to go, oh, this isn't going anywhere. These people don't have a place to go, and they don't have the resources they need or food to eat. And what are we going to do about it? And I was actually traveling. I was in Minneapolis the night it happened. And the next day I was flying home and talking to the other Jason, because there is 2 Jasons that run this organization. And I said, listen, I got this idea. And I said, what if we just do what we do? Like, let's not recreate the wheel, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times when bad things happen, people go, oh, I'm going to start doing this. And it's like, well, is that who you are, right? Is that who God uses you to be? Mm-hmm. And I said, let's know how to do food mobily. Let's go right down to these neighborhoods and let's just feed people. Let's feed neighbors. Let's feed volunteers. And let's connect resources, right? Because I may or may not be good at cutting down a tree, but I know someone else is really good at it, right? And so let's say, hey, we're here, we have food, and come down, right? We got to know the community, bring a chainsaw, bring gloves, and we're going to make sure everyone's fed. And so let's just feed people.
So
And within 24 hours, we were there. And right, that's not because I think I'm smarter than the next person. It's just, I think God showing up and saying, hey, I've given you the tools, I've given you the knowledge. Go be who you're created to be.
that is so beautiful. And there's such a strong theme I'm hearing everywhere, and just trying to point out for everyone I talk to, that unity unleashes God's power. When we come together with that idea of, I'll do my part, you do, let's just go together and we'll all do this. Jesus, his will, his word, John 17, everything comes to life. And then scriptures like, you'll do greater things than these. These scriptures where you say, how is that possible? Well, because we're not alone. If we act alone, we're thinking that we're strong enough alone. But when we act as the body of Christ, it's amazing how in 24 hours, like the hand of God shows up to make sure that it all works what you did. How did you get all that? Did you have enough food and all the stuff already there to do the 24-hour turnaround? How did that happen?
Of course, right? It's another example, right, of God just blessing it and saying what you're doing is well. Actually, we were on site. We went and met some people. Thankfully, it was already a community that we had a relationship in. And so it was nice to be able to walk in and know some faces. And that's all stuff that was set up before, right? And I do believe those relationships God put in place years in advance. Now, while that was happening, I was getting a phone call from someone I never met and said, hey, I'm with so-and-so Huntington Bank, and we want to help support people doing things in our community. And I said, great. Well, we're feeding people. And he said, cool, let me call you back in 10 minutes. 10 minutes was an hour. But an hour, he said, hey, how about I send you 20 grand? And I said, oh, yeah, like that'll be fine. I think
Oh, okay.
So, and then the next thing you knew, I got an email from someone. We had a friend in real estate who just sent out an email and said, hey, BOGG is making sure people are fed. You should give them money, and then the next thing I got an email from someone saying, here's $5,000.
Wow.
And within 48 hours, we had just around 30 grand to help support the communities that were hit by the tornado. And so we actually brought on a part-time person to help us serve that community and just make sure that the needs were being met.
Man, that's so good. I wish we had every backstory of how God moved the person to be ready at the point where they had the 5 grand or the 20 grand, or, there's a backstory in every one of those where they're like, well, we didn't think we were going to do this, but suddenly this thing happened. God always shows up in this way where his will is just being done. What's the most surprising thing that you've learned in the years that these 9 years that you've been doing your ministry? What's the most surprising thing that you've learned in the years that these 9 years that you've been doing your ministry?
That we are here to just be ourselves, right? Like, make yourself present, stay faithful, work hard, expect the unexpected, and it'll happen, right? Like, I know it sounds like it's easy to say it, right? And I know there's so many people that have no idea who I am, and it's like, oh, you're another face telling a story that I don't quite get. But for us, it's that simple. Like, it's been being who we are and being unapologetic in that, right? Right. I'm not trying to be Kanye West, but I'm me, and I want to always be me. And I want to love people, and I want to feed people, and I want to keep it simple, and then continue just to say, hey, God, you've given us a lot of gifts and a lot of tools, and we're grateful for that, and I'm going to use them to glorify you. But at the end of the day, like, trusting and having faith more than myself, right? Like, I can only do so much.
Amen. In the midst of covering God in action in GODSPEED Magazine, we see moments where certain people's stories leave us sitting alone sobbing, but they also inspire us to keep going. Have you experienced those kind of moments where something that you learned about just completely wrecked you, but also inspired you to continue with your ministry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you just said, right, we all have those stories. And to anyone who sees this, right, your story is just as important, just as impactful. So go do whatever it is that you think you're supposed to do.
Amen.
God's telling you. But yeah, I think in the midst of all this, there's a lot I can pull from. But it was about 5 years ago, BOGG was already happening. And we were doing exactly what we said we were going to do. But resources for our staff were minimal, and that was okay. Because making sure our community was taken care of was first and foremost our priority. And I was having my first child at the time.
Wow.
And my wife had just lost her job, and she was the main source of income in the house.
Oh.
And myself personally, I was receiving food from our organization to feed my wife and my newborn child. And, we survived that first year of my son's life, I believe I made $21,000 that year that I cleared. And so I started, a new family on $21,000 a year. And it was one of those moments that the church we were affiliated with was doing a build-out campaign. And we've all been a part of these things, right? Where you come in and it's like, hey, we're doing this thing. If you feel called to give, or feel called to the community of church, right, give. And I was in no place to give. We had no money. And it was a moment that, clear as day, God told me, give $1,000. Commit $1,000 this campaign.
Oh my gosh.
And at the time, my wife was home with our probably month-old son. And I believe, and I'm encouraging anyone, if you truly feel like God is truly speaking to you, and I think God speaks to us individually. I know sometimes things can happen in groups, but I do believe God puts nudges on our hearts. And it wasn't like God said, hey, Jason, give $1,000, right? It was, right, there was something in a moment of just being silent that I felt like God saying, commit $1,000 and trust me.
Yes.
And so I walked up and I gave $1,000 and I walked right out the door and I left. And I mean, because emotionally, I was off, and I knew, like, I got to drive around and think, oh, I'm gonna tell my wife. Like, I just committed $1,000. I committed $1,000 to this project. I'm making a total of $21,000 a year. She's not working. We have a newborn. She'll get it, but I still have to go home and tell her. I just made this commitment, and I made the commitment. It all worked out. The next day, I come to the office, which is inside the church, and I kind of tell the head pastor, I said, hey, last night was weird. And he said, yeah, I saw you made a commitment. I just want you to know, like, I know you're in a tough spot, and that commitment means a lot to us. And I said, yeah, that's great. And I go to the office, and the other Jason, he gets a hold of me, and he says, hey, we need to talk. And I said, okay. He comes in, he looks exhausted, and he said, I haven't slept at all last night. I said, why is that? He said, I spent the whole night arguing with God because God's telling me to give $1,000, but he told me to give it to you, not the church. Now, he and I have not talked. And so I take the $1,000, and of course we kind of talk it through, and, hey, I appreciate you and appreciate your faithfulness, and vice versa. And so I go back to the head pastor and I say, hey, I got to tell you this craziness, right? Like, because this is, I think, how God does reveal himself, but it's also things you don't hear that often. And so I go tell him this, and he looks at me and he goes, you wouldn't believe what happened in the time you saw me this morning to now. I said, well, what's that? He said, someone called the church and said they wanted to give $10,000 to someone individually in the church who needs money. And we decided to give that to you.
Oh my God.
3 hours of my next day, that $1,000 commitment, I had $11,000 in my pocket.
Unbelievable. Only God.
Right, exactly. So in the midst of, like, I was, working some side jobs at the time, it was going to happen. It wasn't like BOGG it wasn't an option to not do it, and it's just, let's be faithful and be who we are. And yeah, and to add on top of it, just to make the story even more crazy, a week later goes by, pastor comes in again and says, hey, I just want you to know another $2,500 came in from that person. We're giving it to you. And I can't make this stuff up. I swear I'm a real person who lives in Dayton, Ohio. This is a real story. And we get a refund check from the hospital for like $3,000 from like, and it makes no sense. Within a month, that $1,000 commitment, I have $18,000 within a month.
That is so powerful and so good. If you're willing to go out there and sacrifice, like it'd be like going on I love God, I love my country, I'm going to serve my country. It's a vision, it's a heartfelt thing. You go to the battlefield, a couple of guys get shot right next to you, you're bleeding. Now, right? How am I coming back to that passion, that initial passion of what it was that got me onto this battlefield in the first place? Because, yeah, boy, that's good. So just to make sure that the last thing they hear is you, what last words or last advice, or specifically, especially before we leave, make sure everyone knows how to give to BOGG, how to connect with BOGG, how people can get involved with BOGG right now. In your last words, include that, but if there's anything else, go for it.
I'm just going to mirror what I just said, or what I said earlier. When serving God, when connecting to your faith, make sure that if you're going to put the chips on the table, you're all in. And know that just like every part of your journey so far has been a roller coaster, just because God may or may not have led you directly or indirectly or clear as day to do something, that roller coaster is still going to exist and life's still going to happen. So stay faithful, stay true to yourself, and be willing to sell out and sacrifice everything if that's really what you feel like you want to do or what God's led you to do, or a combination of both. But to connect to BOGG, social media like we're all on, Instagram, BOGG Ministries, Facebook, BOGG Ministries, Twitter, thebogg.org. And if you want to give, yes, please, and thank you.
Yeah, I'm with him. Please give. If you're capable, if God puts it on your heart, thebogg.org, he just said, is the website. BOGG is because of God's grace. So there's 2 G's. Don't miss the 2 G's. The BOGG with 2 G's.org. And the same thing, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the channels, wherever you want to go to catch up with them. If you just need to know that the world doesn't suck, and I'm just going to say this bluntly, if you need to know the world doesn't suck, thebogg.org would be a good place for you to spend some of your time on a regular basis. These guys will give you hope, just like I hope Jason's giving you hope right now. It gives me hope that good people continue to be doing incredibly God-oriented, inspired, living things. So for each of you that bring the full gospel of Jesus Christ, I want to say to you, Godspeed.